Hi, everyone. So, this is me. Nice to meet you. My name is Masami Kiyono, also just Sami, and I have been drawing forever. This is actually a drawing that I found on my computer the other day, and I did it when I was 4. I think my father was the one who had to type up all the names, or my mother, and this is titled The Christmas Cat. I am dyslexic, and I was very heavily dyslexic as a kid, so I actually learned how to draw before I could even talk. And to illustrate how I've always seen words, this is another thing that I did when I was 4. That's my name, if you can find it. Good for you. If you can't, don't blame you. After a number of years, after I am now 27, this is my drawing style to this date. This is pretty much how I communicate to the world. Imagery, pen, paper. This is how I talk to you. This is how I hope that you understand me. And I've taken this sort of approach to the world and used that with art. And my favorite mode of art would be comics. And I love comics because that is itself its own language. It's a bunch of images put together into a sequence, letting you know what's going on, giving you a sense of time, giving you a sense of story, which is actually why all of us are here. And it also has a little bit of my own personal palette which I developed, which is black and white, or very muted color tones, maybe one bright color. And with this ability to express myself with images, I've taken that into a variety of medium besides comics. I've also done pixel art for video games, making character sprites, very low-level animation. I also like to use my art to make an impact in any minor way that I can sneak in. The character with the cloak, I was working with a team at that point who had, at that point, 2 male protagonists and 1 female protagonist. This was one of the male protagonists, but the way that they wanted to be like more appealing to people and to just, make it more acceptable to everyone was to have this character who was male, but like was kind of female. So it breaks boundaries somehow. So I just made her female. Her name is Ash. I've also done a lot of villains because I really like creepy imagery. I have a lot of fun with it. As you might be able to tell with this game, it was a horror game. A lot of the enemies were just rolling eyeballs. They had an eyeball theme. I've also done storyboarding for friends and for myself. And I've also done illustration for friends and for myself and for clients. One of my most interesting departures into the art world, though, has been printmaking. And through printmaking, I somehow went into a more autobiographic field. The image on your right is, again, another chance to kind of express my own emotions with only images at this point, not really any words. This was right after, both of these images were done after I had lived in Japan for 6 months. And during that time, I had had a messy breakup, and that's what the black and white image was about. The other image, the teal aqua one with myself included, is more interesting because that's going into my family. The man behind me is actually my great-grandfather, Shinkichi Kiyono. And I had never seen this photo until my father found it online, after he did a Google search. And what he didn't expect was to find photos of him in the internment camp in California during World War II. And he didn't expect to also find a social security number and weird taglines that were associated with his name, such as, "See, even the Japanese can have fun." So what this piece was to me, and what I even did through the exploration of text, was talking about how do I even relate to my own name if it can be found online, if most of my history and most of the history of half of my identity is a Google search. And this is another thing you can find through Google. But this is something that I fortunately grew up with before the internet found it. This is the term Happa, or Happa with two P's, depending on what you grew up with. This is a term that means somebody who is originally half Hawaiian, half something else. The term came from Hawaii to signify anybody who is half other, which still applies today, but it's no longer so derogatory. People have taken it and used it as their own power word, their own identity word. It now means anyone who is half Asian and half anything else, and that's meant to be a binding word. And what's great about it is that it's even transforming again to be not just like half Asian, but anyone who's mixed, anyone who doesn't fall into the category of one ethnic identity. And that is a word that actually kind of inspired me to go back to comics and talk about myself. This is the first page of a 2-book series. And this first chapter, Self-Portrait and Introduction, was about how I was dealing with my grandfather's death and going through his old things, including an old tie that was covered in little biplanes, which I thought was cute. But it was also about how I never learned anything about his experience in the camps. He was 16 when he was forced to go there and live in a horse stall, or I assume a horse stall. I mean, to be honest, I never asked him. By the time I would have gotten the courage, he was long gone. And even though I went and actually described what was going on through text, my own emotions, which was hard because I'd only ever done that in journaling or private conversations with friends, even though there were those words, I still went back to what really speaks to me, which are images. And throughout the book, you'll find little secret Easter eggs of planes. My grandfather, after being interned for 4 years, actually went on to be a major engineer at Boeing, which is why he had the little tie with the biplanes on it. The second book was something that I took a lot of pride in because after I hand bound it, I designed a cover paper for it. And since printmaking actually had a really major impact in me and really forced me to look at myself somehow while I'm carving out a piece of wood, this is what I use to make the end paper itself, the cover paper itself. Me kind of exploring my own emotions through carving. And I also experimented again with my general palette of muted tones mixed in with some color. But more importantly, I went in to my own relationship with my family. This story's more about my own mother and how I don't really relate to her, obviously, because while I'm half Japanese, she's white or Anglo-Saxon, American, whatever the term that you want to use. And for some reason, I've never really had an interest in that, and nor has the rest of the world, which is another thing that this mural talks about, or spread within the book. At first, again, this was a much more emotional piece for me, talking more about how people really kind of fetishize me and my father and have all these weird assumptions about what it means to be Japanese, what questions or what things are really cool to say about me, how Asian women especially become these geisha as soon as you mention or as soon as somebody finds out who and what you are. But the thing that I got out of this the most, strangely enough, was character design. I didn't expect that. This is a guy who I just thought looked cool, who kind of embodies a samurai, Lord knows what. But he really kind of seemed like a really creepy guy who I wanted to keep with me. And so when I came into my thesis year, and I knew that I wanted to speak more about this, about what it was for me to be half Japanese, half white, and have the world inflict their own experience on that, I decided he would be a great protagonist. And if you can see, there's my great-grandfather again sneaking through. And because the story was in truth about myself, I decided I would be the perfect strong female protagonist, just saying. And I thought I would have a fantastic relationship with this guy who I was designed to hate. But something I didn't really anticipate is that when you have a thesis class and everyone's looking at your face every day and critiquing it and letting you know that, you look kind of funny in that panel, that's a little hard to hear every day. I don't think I wanted to hear that for a year. So instead, I took this girl. Meet Mako. She's, let's face it, pretty much me, but she sports the short hair that I always wished I could have had, but that's not how curly hair works. She's also much more spontaneous, stubborn, obstinate, and sometimes flat out rude. And again, those are all the things I've always wanted to be to everyone. And she also started to have a much more interesting relationship with this guy, who I started to name Yuurei. In Japanese, Yuurei means ghost, and that's not just like a spooky, terrifying thing that you see in all the horror movies, but a Yuurei is usually something that can be affected by your own interpretation of them, your own feelings, which I thought was really appropriate for all of this. But I also really liked all of my concept drawings were much more interesting than anything else that I had really done. I mean, how do you capture the pencil quality that is just going to always feel so sketchy and so raw, and how do you get those inks that are always going to be so beautiful and crisp? And there was no way I was going to lithograph, which is stone printing this entire thing, or silk screening this entire thing. That wasn't going to happen in this lifetime. So I decided to take another route. Meet a risograph. Now this boxy thing, which is directly from the USA Risograph site, is a machine that is a bit like if you took a screen printer from the 1980s, maybe 1990s at latest, killed them, forced them to be reincarnated as a Xerox machine, and made them make art for you, with 2-color drums inside their stomach. So how this works is that you can actually burn images onto each individual drum, and then use that to make 2-colored images, which is really fantastic, and saves a lot of time if it decides not to eat all of your paper and then jam. It does that a lot, but usually it can save you time, maybe. So here's an example of the process. So you take a sketch that you've been working on, and you take that out, clean it up in Photoshop, whatever. And for me, since I wanted this 2-color, I put some vellum on top, and I inked in Yuurei, because I knew I wanted him to be a separate color, kind of an otherworldly color. And then I used those to burn into the drum. And then once you had one drum, whatever color you wanted, dedicated to the pencil lines, and another drum dedicated to the spooky Yuurei ink lines, you can get an image like this. And then Nathan can come along and tell you it's all wrong. So then you can get an image like this. Now, this story is about Mako, who is having problems with her father back home. He's the Japanese one. She's living in New York, but her father is all the way back in California, and for some reason, he's just not talking to her. And she's reacting by getting incredibly angry. So what happens is that when her own final project comes up for her own art class, she has to figure out how to relate to her own story. And the way that she does that is by talking about another story that she grew up with called Miminashi Hoichi, or Earless Hoichi, which is the tale of this one guy who basically is haunted. But a problem that she doesn't talk about to anyone is that throughout her entire life, she has had this weird ability to see spirits all around her, which is starting to really drive on her nerves. So, without further ado, I want to show you a few of the pages. And if it works out, I want to at least read through the first couple, just because I think it'd be a nice introduction. Without further ado. Centuries ago, at the end of the Heian period in Japan, the Heikei and the Genji clans waged war against one another. This series of battles, now called the Genpei War, would determine which family would take control of the nation and determine the cultural path of Japan as a whole. The other would become nothing more than a haunting memory. The Heikei family would finally succumb during the naval battle off of the southern coast. All surviving members of the royal family court flung themselves overboard, drowning themselves instead of facing capture by the Genji. The tragic tale would live on through the renditions of storytellers for centuries to come. One of these bards would be a blind minstrel named Hoichi, who had become well known for his performance of the final tale. The minstrel knew every aspect of the saga, but had an affinity for the vanquished Heikei. He would whisper the secrets of the royal, sing the wonders of the treasures they lost at sea, and would lament the tragic end of their child emperor. But what Hoichi didn't know was that his own story would soon be intertwined with their tale as well. Okay, be honest, what do you think? Now, at some point in the first 12 pages of the story, she is approached by, after talking with her friend, a good friend, a long friend of hers, who does speak Japanese, honestly better than her, even though they don't share the same ethnicity. She's approached by a really creepy, scuzzy guy. Konnichiwa. Nice stuff, are you an artist? Student. You sure look comfy there. What can I say, I'm a regular. So was that Japanese you were speaking, wasn't it? Are you half? Oh yeah, I can see it now. I studied the language for a while on the West Coast. They call half Asians Happa over there. My family says Happa. Yeah, that's what I said. Oh my God, Mac, that is so cool. You didn't tell me you were Japanese. I mean, you always look like a cartoon character to me, but now I know why. Well, yeah, you're like an anime character. Must be those eyes you have. Sure would love to see the world through those pretty things. Must be something special. Oh, Mac, you're so lucky. You get to have such a cool culture and worldviews and clothes. You get to have everything. Wait, Mac, can you make sushi? Sure would love me some of that. My favorite's the Philly roll. And as I said before, Mako, or Mac as she's called by her coworkers, has this ability that drives her insane to the point where it begins to erupt in her daily life. Meet Yuurei, the ghost who's been haunting her for her entire life, but has now come back to make a special appearance, and she doesn't know how the hell to get rid of him. My goal for this is to complete the entire story, which will be about 70 pages long. The first 24 will be open for viewing on the 22nd, which is the reception of our entire thesis program. And if you would like to buy a copy, please contact me. You can do so here. And thank you so much. Questions?
I'll go first. Okay. So many feelings. I love all of this work, but I'm particularly moved as the parent of a mixed race child. And maybe I don't even have a question, but I just think that making this kind of work is very, very important. And we've talked about it in a world where everyone's going to be mixed in the future eventually, which is awesome. And I'd love to hear, maybe where you would like to take these ideas or these subjects in the future after you've finished this very ambitious piece, if you have any ideas or things that are percolating.
Well, as you might have picked up, I really like the idea of being really obstinate and doing whatever I want. So I actually want to make all of my upcoming stories, everything that I write independently and maybe force into anything that I collaborate on as well, I want to have more mixed race characters, because there's never been a character that really looked like me, and the few other half or mixed artists have mentioned this as well. It's like every character that you see, they're very clearly devoted to one world, and that's something that I can't relate to because I'm used to having one foot in one world and one foot in another. And I want that to just be like not just treated as a special circumstance or something that's just hard and unimaginable. I want that to be something that is appreciated as just basic human experience. It's something we all go through, and the idea that we don't is a complete lie. So what I want to do is that I just want to keep writing stuff like this, even if it's not exactly about myself, looking at monsters every day. Even just like in folklore stories or other comic projects that I have about circus assassins. Like I want there to be characters that I actually know could exist in the real world. I want there to be mixed race characters. I want there to be somebody who's mysteriously brown, and it doesn't matter that they're brown, they're just people. I want them to be like me.
Hey, what's up? I know that you had a long process with the risograph, and you were sort of, you struggled to figure out what palette was going to work for you, and you ended up with this really cool like teal and red combination. Do you plan on experimenting with different ink combinations for the future installments?
Yeah, actually for the 13th page, I have the book in 2 installments. The first 12 pages is the first chapter. The second half, this second 12 pages, so pages 13 through 24, is going to be chapter 2. And I do have a little bit of pink that I sneaked in there instead of the red, which I thought was cool, and I liked it so much I might try and sneak it again in the 3rd act. I don't know, pink. I'm just going to experiment. Yes.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
I know this isn't part of this here, but I just was wondering if you could speak a little about your installation downstairs.
Oh, yeah. So we all had to make an installation, and with my installation, I wanted to relate. I don't have a photo, but if you go to Instagram and look up Blue Line Pencil Pusher, you definitely can see it. Or you can go downstairs to the first level. It's actually relating to Mako's own experience growing up being Asian, and I really did want to kind of reflect that. So I have a short or a kotatsu or a fake kotatsu table, low-end table, that I made myself through the VFL. I also have a screen that I put up there with Yuurei's face on it. It was my way of bringing you into Mako's own experience of, yeah, she's a college student, but this is just her regular everyday life.
Hello.
Hi.
You shared a lot of your process online through social media. I was just wondering, through hashtags and all of that, what sort of response have you gotten because you're making this unique sort of mixed race comic? Has anybody responded positively, negatively? What was your experience with that?
It's all been positive. I've had a lot of people who are mixed race, a lot of Happas specifically, but anyone who can relate to the hashtag of mixed. I've had a lot of people just start following me, like giving me a lot of support. It's all been really cool to see that there are people online who really want to see more of this out there.
I really love your drawing and your painting style. It's so luscious. It's so absolutely lyrical. And I was just wondering what your influences have been, artists who you've loved, who you've emulated, and where you see yourself going graphically as an artist.
I don't know my future, but I can at least tell you what I have been inspired by. My dad, even though he is American, he did grow up in Japan. And he's also a little bit of a rebel, so he would, as growing up as a kid in El Cerrito, California, which is a small town that there's not that much there, he would get these laser discs, he would rent them and somehow burn them onto a VHS, which we would keep forever, which I don't know how he did or where he found the laser discs to begin with. But they were all completely in Japanese, and they were all the Miyazaki films. So I was influenced by those when I was incredibly small. I just thought everybody grew up with Totoro. It was really weird to realize that no one knew what I was talking about. When he would show them to me, they would also be in Japanese, so I didn't understand it. So I would like say, "What are they saying next? What are they doing?" Like for an hour and a half, which he got really tired of. So he would be like really patient at first, but then like stop translating halfway through and just like kind of zone out. So I never was quite sure what half of the film was. But another thing that really influenced me, mentioning my dad again, was that he's also an artist, and he's done a lot of sumie, or sumi drawings, pretty much forever. So I was influenced by that. Not just Miyazaki, but the other films he would show me. I'm also, as I mentioned before, like printmaking I didn't realize that would become such a thing for me. So I think there's a little bit of German expressionism. Art Ward is definitely in there, and every comic that was sneaked into, well, not sneaked into my house, there were just like huge bins of them, but you know, I would sneak into my dad's library and then take them without him knowing. He was fine with it. I don't think there was ever a problem. And I also watched a lot of Samurai Pizza Cats. That kind of sums it up. Artistically, graphically, what I can say is that I'm probably going to keep doing comics, and I'm probably going to keep using the risograph as long as I can have access to one.
Okay, thank you, Sami.